It's time we're talking Nebraska ball.
You are Locked On Huskers, your daily podcast on the Nebraska Cornhuskers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey gang, DP here, Derrick Pearson, 93.7 The Ticket, Lincoln, Nebraska, home of the Fighting Huskers, University of Nebraska, Lincoln. Thank you, folks, for joining us and letting Locked On Huskers be your first stop. Watch, listen each and every single day for this kind of content on your Huskers. Greatly appreciate it. Folks on BetOnline, we say thank you for what you allow us to do. The best odds, props, and lines each and every single day. It's where the game begins. BetOnline. Hoops! There it is. It's that time of year to kind of transition, and we need to get coverage to and pay homage to Nebraska basketball, both men's and women's. So, of course, this episode, we're going to go through what's going on with the men's program, what's going on in the women's program. And then because we get down like that, we'll even whisper quietly about Nebraska basketball, volleyball, and its number 2 seed in the NCAA tournament. But don't tell anybody. Subscribe, like, share the content. Please do that. Greatly appreciated for you being a part of the Locked On Huskers, Locked On Go Big Red, and Locked On Sports family. Greatly appreciate it. I've just been back. If you've noticed in some of the past episodes, I've given you some of the mobile reports and episodes. Different locations, different spaces, different places, but spent the last few days in Orlando, Florida for the ESPN Invitational. And in that space, watching 8 really good basketball programs. Now, they're all playing at different levels currently, but if you go through the list of those programs and said, that my projection would almost be that 5 of them make the NCAA tournament. We couldn't be really surprised of them, that 3 of them have a legitimate shot to do some damage in the tournament. But this was a tournament that included Oklahoma, who ended up winning the tournament with a 3-point victory. Stanford was there in this tournament. Memphis, Penny Hardaway and his Memphis Tigers were there. Ole Miss, who play just a unique, consistent, strong type of basketball, great wing play. None of the teams had a dominant big until later in the tournament where Nebraska got their captain back. But that's the lead. The lead is that what Orlando presented was the return of Derrick Walker to the Huskers. And the captain is back, and we got a glimpse of how important he is to this team, its success, winning games, playing in the Big Ten, and any other success that they may have. He is a different version of Derrick Walker than the previous versions that we've seen. He is a more aggressive, more settled, stronger Derrick Walker, first of all. And the things that Derrick Walker does for Fred Hoiberg and his team is multifold and consistently fluid. It's always changing. That in his first game back, you could see some of the rust. You could see maybe some of the hands. The touch wasn't his usual level. His catch and go game was a little bit affected, a little bit different than what we had expected. But you saw him make himself available to the rest of the team. And that's important because Derrick has skill sets that not only play in the Big Ten Conference, but will play going forward for the young man. What he did in this space, especially against Florida State. Now, Florida State, playing without his best player, then they've got a big. They've got McLeod is 7'3", I believe. Athletic, super long, aggressive in his play. And what happened in this game was Derrick Walker dragged him. It's a phrase I like to use. He dragged him in deep water because Nebraska early on this season has difficulty in its press break. And teams figured out that if we trap Nebraska at the corners, whether 3/4 court, half court, or in the front court, there's some problems it creates for Nebraska offensively. It puts a lot of pressure on Sam Griesel. It wears him out. It puts additional pressure on Emmanuel Bandamel, having to be the backup point guard. Young Lawrence got in the game, and they tried to put him there and see how he would handle the pressure. And they all had some level of success and difficulty. But it was Derrick Walker to the rescue. And to have a big in the Big Ten who can handle the ball, Derrick became the press break. He became the man in the middle. Whenever Griesel got in trouble, he would go to Walker. Walker would catch, turn, triple threat, and then get into the system. If they ran a trap at him, he could see over it and through it. But what he also did in dragging Florida State's bigs out from under the basket, it then freed up the thing which is almost second nature to Fred Hoiberg's offense, which is ball in the middle to a big, and then perimeter players back cutting defenders who are beyond the defensive threshold and their ability to cut back to the basket at the same speed as the offensive player. Like, that is a base advantage in this offense. And it's good to see that it is now a factor in Fred Hoiberg's offense. And they're going to be utilizing it because Derrick Walker would catch in the middle, the point guards would get it, or the wings would get it to Derrick Walker at the top of the key, depending on how far out the opposing center would come. Or if he was defended at the free throw line, Derrick could catch and drive by. He could go left, he could go right, and then he'd get it to the glass. Sometimes he'd jump stop using the old pro game jump stop, gathering himself, pump faking a big, get him in the air, going to the free throw line, or kicking it back out to an open shooter. All of this is what's in Fred Hoiberg's system. It just hadn't been utilized without Derrick Walker. Derrick Walker's ability to handle the ball. He could dribble up. As a matter of fact, he'd catch a rebound and get the Huskers into their offense. He'd dribble it across half court and then get them into their system. But his ability to help with press break, take some of the burden, some of the physical burden off Sam Griesel, so he doesn't have to handle the ball so much. It takes some of the burden off Emmanuel Bandoumel, and it frees up everybody else. Now, there's interesting chemistry that's happened. Juwan Gary, and they play similar, so I got caught. Juwan Gary, the transfer in from Alabama, who's faced these monsters before. His ability to finish, he can shoot the three. You don't want to live there. You don't want him getting his mail there, but it's nice for him to visit there. Shooting threes, opening up space, but his ability to put it on the floor, and he had 2 exclamation point dunks against Florida State, where the folks from ESPN all stood, rose, and applauded his play. Derrick Walker had a couple of those finishes as well. What Derrick Walker did for this team against Florida State opened up the gate. His chemistry, there's a chemistry between Derrick Walker and Casey Tamanaga. That is ongoing, and that is impressive, and that's fun to watch. Pick and roll game between those two. And then Sam Griesel and his ability to handle all the pressure that's put on him, to handle the ball in those spaces. They come home 4-3 and face Boston College at home, and then they'll kind of jump into the gauntlet, which is a pretty impressive run of opponents that they're going to have to face, including Creighton and Indiana and Purdue. So getting a win against Boston College would be a really good way to set this thing up going into December. But kudos to the way they played. Better bench play, better bench energy, better coaching energy, all good stuff against Florida State in the win, a dominant win against the Florida State Seminoles. Before the break, we'll come back. We're going to dive into the other side. We're going to talk about Amy Williams and the ladies of Nebraska basketball and where they are coming back from Puerto Rico up to war. Welcome back. Appreciate you hanging out with us again as we talk a little hoops. Fred Hoiberg and the men and what they did in Orlando, finding a way to get a win, getting their 4th win of the season against Florida State. But we'll lean forward and talk about Amy Williams and the 5-2 Lady Huskers after the break here, after this little pause. BetOnline, our friends who provide odds, props, and best lines each and every single day. It's where the game begins, and that includes basketball. So if you lean towards the curiosity in how games should be played out or how games might be played out, jump on BetOnline. It's where the game begins, and they have all that information for you. Amy Williams had an interesting offseason and trying to figure out what she was going to do with this roster. There were some spots that need to be filled. A lot of returning players. She was going to return the entire starting 5 that finished last season's NCAA team, and then an injury to Sam Haiby kind of put a damper on that, and then forced Amy Williams to kind of reconsider roles and responsibilities of different players. A question of note for me, Trinity Brady, who had been injured for the last 2 seasons, finally well enough to get out there. She's been in the starting lineup for all 7 games for the Huskers and gives about 16, 17 minutes a game for Amy Williams. And it's important to say that because Sam Hybe came back early, much earlier than expected, much earlier than stated previously. And then what appeared to be re-injured said injury, and then has been out of the lineup and off the court the last 2 games while they're in Puerto Rico. Now, not an ideal situation, and certainly not the most meaningful of games for Nebraska to force Sam Hybe to be out there. You can take your time and get it right, which is the important thing for such an important person, not only just player, an important person. On this in this program, Sam Hybe is an important. She's a leader. She's the poise factor. She's the cool factor. She gets them in and out of situation and circumstance. She's amazing off the floor as well as on the floor. She is this team's leader, and it doesn't matter whether she's on the floor. This team is a Sweet 16, Grade 8 team with a healthy Sam Hybe on it. That's how important she is, and I'll fall on that grenade at that level. Sam Hybe is that important to this basketball team because she takes some of the additional ball handling, decision making, energy corralling, leadership responsibility off of Jaz Shelley, and the 2 of them together provide a very difficult tandem. Forget about it just being the Big Ten. But women's college basketball has a difficult problem when you have 2 exceptional 3-level players on both sides of the ball on the floor at the same time. Guards that can defend full court, they can defend in the trap. They all rebound well. They can all be your playmaker on offense. They can all knock down key jumpers, long or short, in critical moments. They're great defensive trendsetters. They can set the tone for what they want other teams to have to do against Nebraska. So missing Sam Hybe affects Jaz Shelley, except in the last game in Puerto Rico, Jaz Shelley put on a performance that is top level to hit 4 threes in an overtime. In any overtime against anybody. Look, you got a game that's in overtime. It's a competitive game. Jaz Shelley put this team on her back and didn't break a sweat. To watch the enthusiasm of her teammates as they recognize, and there's a thing that happens when you recognize when your best player or one of your best players gets it going. Like when it's the magic time and you're watching it, that she was shooting extended level 3s 4 feet beyond the arc. And it was, look, everybody raised their hands and put up the 3s because they knew it was going in. It was important because this was a game that could have gotten away from the Huskers. And Jaz Shelley put this team on her back and finished away. It was impressive to me because Jaz has kind of had hot and cold moments when it comes to her shooting. She got it going. You can always count on the rebound. You can always count on her to handle the ball and get Nebraska into offenses. It'll be interesting over the next couple of games to see what the rotations is. Kendall Moriarty seems to play better with certain people on the floor. And I think, Allison Weiner and Kendall play better together. They seem to defend better. They seem to communicate better when the other's on the floor. And then they know where the other wants to be, wants the ball, different spots on the floor, different timing on the floor. Alexis Markowski has been hot and cold. And look, real talk, with all the preseason hype, folks, Markowski's not sneaking up on anybody this year. Like, they understand who she is, what she does. They're going to force her to go away from her strong game and go opposite. She's made adjustments in that. But let's be clear, she's still averaging a double-double with 12 points, almost 13 points a game, 10 rebounds a game. And plus she's shooting the ball well. So I think she's had 4 really good shooting nights out of the 7. So Markowski is providing what she does. Izzy Bourne is the player who, quite frankly, makes it either easy for Nebraska or difficult. Because when she's got her game rolling, which is that mid-range game, she can shoot the 3. Again, you want her to visit there. You don't want her to get her mail there. But Izzy under the basket in the paint with her footwork, her ability to get off shots with either hand, high off the glass or over the front of the rim, makes it really difficult to defend this Nebraska team. They are currently 7 or 8 deep. They're trying to figure out what to do with Kroll and company. But listen, at 5-2 and an opportunity to come home and put some wins together and get a streak going as you head into the Big Ten Conference, I still say this. With Sam Haiby, they're definitely a Sweet 16 team. They're one of the top 16 teams in the country. Without her, they're still top 25. And I think they have the ability, once they get the rotation right, once they get that player rotation right and the chemistry right and figure out who's going to play with who, this Husker team will be a problem in the Big Ten Women's Basketball Conference. Before the break, we'll come back. We'll close out. Give a little shout-out to John Cook and the Huskers volleyball team as they head into the NCAA tournament. And then some interesting stats from both the men's program and the women's program. Double-digit players. I didn't know. Things I didn't know. It's Hoops There It Is edition. We wanted to check in on Nebraska basketball, both men's and women's, a couple of things that were in play. A number that even after Orlando that jumped out at me, that when you look at the stats for Nebraska, the men's program, they have not one player in double figures. Not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5. 6. 6 players averaged 10 points a game for the Huskers. Derrick Walker, again, in his 2 games, he leads the way at 17.5 points a game. Sam Griesel, 11 points a game. CJ Wilcher, 11 points a game. 10 apiece for Juwan Gary and 10 for Keisei Tamanaga and Emmanuel Bandama. Keisei was the one that kind of stood up, but he's had those 4 big performances. And listen, Keisei's starting to get his legs. He's also figured out his mid-range game, that he can pump fake. People will run him off the three-point line because that's what he's known for. But he's got the nice runner. He's got the nice two-handed finish around the bucket. Listen, it's an added factor, and quite frankly, it makes it real easy for him to get minutes, quality minutes, because he was closing the half in both cases. Vital 4-minute runs, Keisei Tamanaga was on the floor. It was good to see Jamarcus Lawrence out there get his. Denham Dawson, of course, is kind of the mood setter and the defensive game changer. Brad Bach starting to get his feel with his footwork around the basket. Of course, Blaze Keita had a couple of really good ball games as well. But Derrick Walker, averaging 2 games, 17.5 points, 12.5 rebounds for the Huskers. So good on him. On the other side for the ladies, I kept thinking to myself, what numbers, if you're defending the Huskers and you're scouting the Huskers, how would it play out? The leading scorer on the team surprised me. I thought it would be Jazz Shelley. It is, in fact, Alexis Markowski, who gives you 13.5 points a game, 10.5 rebounds a game. That's just impressive. She's shooting at 51% from the field, 37%, 38% from 3. The number that we circle for the the biggest scorer for Nebraska is 56% from the free throw line. She's 14 of 25. That's 11 points left at the table. And that's going to play out in the Big Ten Conference because once teams know, they're going to foul you rather than let you finish and take the easy chippies. But Jazz Shelley averaging 13 points a game along with 7 assists and 3 rebounds. Izzy Bourne giving you all sorts of numbers. She's giving you 7 points a game. She's giving you 11 points a game, 7 rebounds a game, and handling the ball and in the defensive work that she's putting in. Allison Widener with 10 points a game as well. And then Annika Stewart coming off the bench. And this is an impressive one to settle because this is another big who can shoot the ball. But Annika Stewart coming off the bench with 8 points a game for the Huskers. We'll close with this because I want to be sure that we give credit where credit is due. John Cook and what he's done, of course, a legendary Hall of Fame career, and with this amazing senior group that's leaving the program. Names like Maddie Kubik and Kinsey Knuckles and Nicklin Hames. And look, this is a deep group. Even Ani Buckets. I got to give you a shout out, Ani Buckets. They go into the NCAA volleyball tournament as a 2 seed. They'll host the first 2 games at home. Then they'll go on the road and they'll face the folks that looks like they're headed towards a matchup with Louisville, which they're very familiar with. To that we say, well done, the ladies of Husker volleyball, once again making Husker Nation proud. We'll close with the 3 words that you'll hear at the Devaney Center as Huskers volleyball hosts 2 games. Go Big Red.